Hello, welcome to Italics, the Italian American magazine. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. Thus far, February has brought us a northeast snowstorm for the ages, the first resignation of a pope in 600 years, and two frightening near-Earth meteorites, one that just missed us and one that didn't. One can only wonder what events March may bring us. First on this edition of Italics, we'll introduce you to journalist and author David Evanier, whose new book, All the Things You Are, is an in-depth, unauthorized biography of Anthony Bennedetto, better known around the world as Tony Bennett, one of the greatest jazz and pop vocalists of all time. Tony Bennett is still singing for new generations of music lovers. He's universally loved and respected, not just for his vocal gifts, but recently we have found out that Mr. Benedetto is also an accomplished painter. Next, we'll join NOIAW, the National Organization of Italian American Women, for their annual Epiphany Celebration, which honors three wise women. The Epiphany Celebration was recently held at the historic Columbus Citizens Foundation Townhouse. Then, in conjunction with the observation of the Giorno del Ricordo, the Day of Recollection, which is February 10th, we'll speak with one Italian citizen of the Istria Dalmatian region of Yugoslavia, which had been a part of Italy as far back as the Roman Empire. Under the fascist regime of Marshal Tito, immediately following World War II, this area experienced great social turmoil, violence, and oppression. Now, let's go to the Calandra Institute and listen to David Evanier tell us why so many of us love Tony Bennett so much.
See how she looks. Wait till you hear her laugh. Painters of paintings, writers of books, never could tell the half.
I'll start with a story about Ray Charles. Tony was singing at the Hollywood Bowl a few years ago, and he was singing Lost in the Stars. And a shooting star came down from the sky behind him, above him. The following morning, he got a phone call from Ray Charles, who he'd never spoken to before. And Ray Charles said, "How did you do that, man?" And he hung up. That's the starting point of my book, in a sense, because it really is a question, how did he do it? How does he continue to do it at the age of 86? Tony has always been a work in progress. When I saw him speak at the Metropolitan Museum on his paintings, he said he was still trying to find himself. This was 4 years ago. And he will always be like that. He was a Depression child. The family came to Little Italy, 139 Mulberry Street from Calabria. His mother was a seamstress. As she worked on the fabrics at home, if they were inferior, she would throw them over her shoulder and not work on them. And he took this as an example of how he should judge music, that he was only going to sing songs of real quality. His father was a grocer. He died when Tony was 9. His father was a singer as well, and Tony heard songs of his father singing on a hillside in Calabria. His father would read the classics to the children. He would read Of Human Bondage. He would talk to him about Paul Robeson, about Gandhi. His father told him to look beneath the surface of things, as things were not always what they appeared to be, that you judge people not just by their appearance. From the start, Tony was both a singer and a painter. He would draw with chalk on the sidewalk, and his pals would throw peanuts at him to distract him, and he would keep painting. He would keep drawing, which was the key to his total personality. He was turned down by the High School for Performing Arts, but he got into the High School of Industrial Arts, and he actually regarded that as good luck. He would go into the city and he would see Count Basie and Duke Ellington at the Paramount and the Strand. By the age of 15, his favorites were Sinatra, Fred Astaire, Jimmy Durante, and Armstrong. Tony had to drop out of high school to help his family. He worked in the laundry, he was an usher in a theater, he was a page in a library, he was a singing waiter at Ricardo's, and he loved that. He said he would like to be well known, but if he remained anonymous, he would be happy being a singing waiter for the rest of his life. In 1940, he played amateur nights in every borough. He got his first professional engagement at 15, and he chose the name Joe Barry from the area of Italy. December 7th, 1941, the World War started. Tony enlisted. He hated the military. He hated the violence. He became a lifelong pacifist. He was harassed by a sergeant for being Italian. He participated in the Battle of the Bulge. He saw the horrors of war up front. He helped liberate the Landsberg concentration camp. And that was something that, of course, he would never forget. He was also very, very offended by the segregation of the troops. He went home, he took 20 cents a day from his mother to go into the city to look for work as a singer. At the end of the day, he always gave her back 10 cents. He studied on the GI Bill, the American Theater Wing. He had a wonderful teacher named Miriam Spear, who told him not to imitate other singers, but to imitate the instruments. And what you have is a singer who sounds like no one else. Pearl Bailey was running an all-black review, starring in an all-black review at the Greenwich Village Inn in Greenwich Village. And she insisted that Tony be included in the show, although he was white. And he was in the show. He was the only white performer. And then she did something else for him. She invited Bob Hope down to see the show. Bob Hope became another rescuer of Tony. He loved the show. He asked him what his name was. Tony said Joe Barry. And Bob Hope said, that's not going to work. What's your real name? And Tony said, Tony Bennedetto. Anthony Dominic Benedetto. And Bob Hope said, well, that's too long for the marquee. Let's call you Tony Bennett. And he brought him down to the Paramount Theater where he was starring. And Tony was a sensation, overnight sensation at the Paramount. That night, Tony wired his mother, told her to stop working almost instantly. It was 1950. He was 27 years old.
I do not know a day I did not love you. I can't remember love not being there.
David, why Tony Bennett? I know you've done many different musicians. Why Tony Bennett?
I lived with Tony Bennett my whole life. He's been part of the soundtrack of my life. I love the Italian-American singers most. I've written about a bunch of them. And Tony was a logical candidate. The other thing is that there was no biography of Tony. This is the very first. So it was like virgin territory.
It's an unauthorized biography.
Right.
And from the reading, I understand that you prefer to work in this method.
Yes. It gives me the freedom to explore the character. And, you know, I don't want to do PR. I want to do the truth. And the truth is generally a lot more complicated than what the subject of the book wants to hear.
Tony seems to be loved by everybody. Why do you think that is?
Well, he has a personality that I have met Tony. He has the sweetest personality imaginable. He also is very positive, and he imparts a lot of optimism. Also, and he's very appreciative of other people. I mean, you know, the fact that he will draw you with a pen and a sketch pad when he meets you,
that shows he's not just involved in himself, he's involved in the other person. Tony is a person who is constantly evolving. He's not full of himself. He's got no entourage. He's the only celebrity I know of who answers the door himself, doesn't walk around with a whole bunch of bodyguards. Frank would have 10, 15 bodyguards. And I think also his voice has a tremendous warmth, and you feel like he's a friend. And he's appreciative of the audience. The audience is what made him. He knows that. He's constantly going back to Astoria, constantly walking the streets of New York. I think it's all those factors.
I know that you've uncovered some things that might seem unsightly, like drug addiction, but he's overcome that, and mafiosi, which everybody had to deal with at a certain time period. Why do you think they're so protective of his legacy? What do you think is behind all of that?
I think when you penetrate any of these people who are at that level, you'll find there's an apparatus, a machinery at work that is so dedicated in a PR way to safeguarding the image that it's beyond all reason. There is no reason why the real Tony Bennett should not be totally known to us.
Can you tell me something about his involvement with the civil rights? I'm not sure that's completely well known.
He definitely has a very deep feeling for civil rights, and his deepest friends were frequently the black musicians, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and he saw the way they were treated, how they were not allowed to be in the same hotel, even when they were starring. Since Tony was in World War II, and he saw the segregated troops, he saw the concentration camps, he saw the results of racism, and he had an experience with a very close friend, a black friend of his from Astoria, when he invited him to dinner, and he was ridiculed for that, and he was demoted, and he was traumatized by that experience. Tony has always been a forthright and a devoted member of the civil rights movement. He marched with Dr. King at Selma. He's been involved in civil rights activities his entire life. He refused to sing in South Africa because of apartheid. He refused to sing in the South because he'd seen a cross burning at one point. And this all goes back to his family, because his family had been very poor, and he knew about the way Italians had been discriminated against and how they were at the bottom of the economic scale. That was the experience of his parents and of that generation.
Something that surprised you, that you were surprised to learn about Tony?
His toughness. His toughness. He hides that the way Sinatra hides his sensitivity.
Because you've talked about him being a very, very sensitive soul.
Right. Columbia was denigrating his talents, and the myth was that Columbia let him go, Columbia Records, but actually Tony walked away. And first they offered him this huge contract, and he asked his manager to see the contract, which was a renewal, and Tony tore it in half with his bare hands. And the following day he went to see the business manager of Columbia, Walter Dean, who thought they were going to celebrate the signing of the contract. And Walter Dean stood up, and Tony socked him in the jaw and said good day and walked out. So that to me was a side of him which made complete sense and which I admire. For me, no biographical subject is without flaws, and Tony Bennett is one of the most remarkable and great figures, of the 20th century, as far as I'm concerned.
It seems to me that he's able to reinvent himself. I don't know if this is Tony's doing. I don't know if it's part of the machinery you talked about that's behind him. Is it just that he appeals to the younger generation? Is he consciously aligning himself with the younger generation?
I think he's definitely consciously aligning himself, and I think that has a lot to do with Danny. On the other hand, the younger kids, including Amy Winehouse, or the young stars, appreciate the fact that he's authentic, he's real, and he's a fine artist.
The Frank Sinatra School.
Frank Sinatra School for the Arts, which Tony formed with his wife. I visited it in Astoria. It's a vocational school for kids who may not be able to afford a full education in the arts. Sinatra unquestionably is Tony's idol, because Tony feels that Sinatra is the greatest singer of all time. I don't think anyone would dispute that.
This whole mafiosi thing.
Yeah.
Sinatra didn't seem to have a problem with it. I mean, Sinatra basically said, when I didn't eat, these were the guys who paid me and who fed me. So I don't really care what you say about my associations.
Right.
Seems a little different with Tony. Any ideas on that?
Well, one thing I discovered in my book was that Tony paid off the mafia to get them off his back. He paid $600,000. We're talking about in the late 60s.
We're talking about real money, yeah.
Real money, a huge amount of money. Tony, if you take a look at a painting Tony did called The Underworld, it's in his book of paintings called What My Heart Has Seen. That's his true feeling about the mafia. But he did buy them off. I mean, that's a fact.
And this is something within the legacy that they're afraid will make him look bad, or?
That's something I uncovered in my book that no one came upon. The view of him is so positive. You know, it's inconceivable to me to understand what they are unhappy with, except that, as I say, with people at this level, they're so accustomed to control that they can't take yes for an answer. They cannot take yes for an answer. It's not enough.
Next, we'll join NOIAW, the National Organization of Italian American Women, for their annual Epiphany Celebration, which honors 3 wise women from the community. This year's honorees were Agata Mus, owner of Agata and Valentina Fine Italian Specialty Foods; Teresa Pesce of KPMG, an expert on money laundering and financial security; and Dr. Susan J. Vannucci, a neuroscientist specializing in newborn medicine at Weill Cornell Medical Center.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight to welcome you all. I'd like to congratulate our 3 honorees, each of whom represents a wonderful role model for our younger generation: Agata Mus, Terry Pesce, and Dr. Susan Vannucci.
Our mission is twofold. Firstly, we strive to preserve the Italian language, heritage, and culture in our country. And secondly, we promote the educational and professional advancement of Italian American women.
As you've heard, I currently attend Columbia University. When I was first applying to graduate programs, I knew that I wanted something exceptional, especially for my region of study, that being environmental policy. Upon receiving this gracious scholarship, I had substantial assistance that I needed to adequately prepare for graduate school. I was entering a program where the first semester was heavily focused on science: chemistry, hydrology, toxicology, climatology, a lot of ologies. And I come from a background of diplomacy and international relations, so this was completely foreign to me. And if I hadn't had the assistance of NOIAW, I wouldn't have been able to have that sturdy foundation that really prepared me for success, and I could have easily become discouraged in those pivotal months.
I met my husband Joe in Italy, and in 1981 came back with him in New York City. That's why all my complaints about food started. I always compare the fruit and vegetable with the one I used to get in Sicily. The broccoli were not green enough, the orange were not fresh enough, the tangerine didn't smell like the one that we picked up from the trees in Sicily. Don't forget about the fish. One day we start talking and decide that maybe it was the time, maybe to stop my complaining, that we did something together. Finally, Agata and Valentina opened in 1993. Last year we opened a place in University Place and 10th Street. It has been a new adventure with a lot of challenge every day, and but that's what life is about. My wish for the future is that God will give me the strength to continue doing every day what I love, and which is bringing the passion of Italian food and Italian heritage to New York City. Thank you again.
than speak about myself because I'm kind of boring, I'd like to speak a little bit about the Italian American and Italian women in my past who made me who I am. On my mother's side, I'm third generation American. My mother's maternal grandmother came from a reasonably educated family. As it was explained to me, her father was a judge in Sicily, who moved around from town to town hearing cases. Judge's daughter or not, like so many Italian immigrants, she and her family settled on the Lower East Side of New York City. She's the only one of the three that did not graduate from college. But she was a gifted pianist and studied piano at the Institute of Musical Art, which is the precursor to the Juilliard School. She raised two children, my mother, the eldest, and my uncle, and occasionally taught piano in Brooklyn, where they settled down. My mother enrolled in nurses training school at Long Island College Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, and became, by all accounts, a gifted nurse. Now, while my Sicilian great-grandmother was pushing her children off to school, on another street in the Lower East Side of New York, my maternal grandmother was leading a very, very different life. She came to this country as a teenager from Bari, married and had 5 children. Her husband, my grandfather, drove an ice wagon around the Lower East Side. By the age of 30, she was a widow with 4 children, having lost her husband and her youngest child to the flu in 1918. She went to work in the sweatshops, sewing buttonholes for a living, and supported not only her 4 children, but 3 other members of an extended family. My father was the only one in the family to finish high school, but he would then go on to go to college and go to law school. He was her success story. My parents married in 1959, a second go-round for each, and had their only child, me. That was the following year. When in 1971, both she and my mother passed away, my grandmother at age 83, my mother at 44 from cancer. Having lost a wife and mother within a month, my father was a bit at sea. So he needed another strong woman to take the reins, and my Sicilian grandmother came in and stayed and made sure that I was grafted. I graduated from college and law school at Columbia with my grandmother at my side for both of those graduations. But I am a product of my heritage and my genes. Perhaps my Sicilian great-great-grandfather's judicial genes compared with my father's to influence me in my choice of profession, going to law school, becoming a prosecutor, and now helping financial institutions prevent and detect money laundering. Unfortunately, I did not inherit my maternal grandmother's piano skills, nor did I inherit my paternal grandmother's cooking talents. When I say I'll cook at home, my husband Andy will say, "Don't threaten me."
I grew up in a Jewish household on the South Shore of Long Island in the 50s and 60s. At the age of 16, I was off to college, and I wound up in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the late 60s. What an incredible time to be on a university campus, right? I mean, on that campus, we thought we could do anything. We did. So at the age of 20, I went off to pursue a Ph.D. in a pharmacology department out in Denver, Colorado. And although those were very exciting times, it was a tough time for women to actually pursue professional careers. So after a really tough year and being very discouraged, I decided to put that career thing on hold. I came back to New York, and I was very lucky to get a job as a research technician at Cornell Medical College, right down the road here at 69th in York, in the Department of Neurology. And after about a year, this young child neurology fellow in training named Robert Vanucci came into the lab. He actually is a budding child neurologist. He wanted to do research to understand how baby brains work. What was different about their metabolism? What made them different? What made the way they suffered an injury that so many babies do when they're deprived of oxygen at birth? We worked together, and ultimately we actually developed an animal model together to study this. And so We worked together for several years before we did anything else together, but ultimately we did. And we actually went to the Hershey Medical Center in Hershey, Pennsylvania when they first opened their doors. And we married there in 1976, and that was when I actually became Susan Benucci. Ultimately, obviously, go back and finish my Ph.D. I decided to do it before I turned 40, because I was going to turn 40 anyway. Might as well do it with my Ph.D. I then did 1 year of commuting postdoctoral fellowship at the NIH, came back to Hershey and launched my career as a developmental neuroscientist. In 2002, I had an opportunity to come back here to New York, and I did. And I am now actually the research director back at Cornell. I think there's some symmetry in finishing up my career where it started. I'm still teaching clinical fellows how to do research, but now I'm the boss. I'm not the technician.
Starting in 1947, year of the Paris Peace Treaties, which sanctioned the succession of Yugoslavia from Istria, Fiume, Zara, and the area of Dalmatia, a mass exodus began. It is estimated that over 300,000 Italians left their homelands, 100,000 of which emigrated abroad. Eligio Klapčić is one of these 100,000.
Nel 1946 la mia storia incomincia a quell'epoca, quando mio padre e mia madre hanno deciso di andare via da quella zona occupata dalla Jugoslavia di Tito. Così mio padre, che aveva la possibilità di lavorare nei camion, ha fatto una scatola, diciamo così, di ferro, nella quale io potevo andarci dentro, ero piccolo, 14 anni, e si preparavano così per portarmi in Italia. Ho detto in Italia perché Trieste non era ancora italiana, era sotto gli americani e gli inglesi che lasciavano fare ai titini a Trieste quasi quello che volevano. Il flusso emigratorio da Trieste e della Venezia Giulia verso i continenti non era dovuto solamente per ragioni economiche e di lavoro, erano dovute soprattutto per il fatto che hanno subito una vicenda travagliata politica e economica che li ha costretto a lasciare la loro terra. Come italiani che vanno al mondo come tutti gli altri italiani, comunque hanno già avuto una prima emigrazione. In questo contesto noi abbiamo subito delle grandi colpe, come quella di pagare il conto per una guerra che abbiamo perso. L'immigrazione ci ha portato, specialmente alla mia famiglia, negli Stati Uniti, a New York, però sempre avevo la mia piccola casa in Italia, perché non si dimentica mai.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. For Italics, I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.
All of it lovely, all of it thrilling. I'll never be willing to free her. When you see her, you won't believe your eyes. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're beautiful.